Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Persian and the Cowboy podcast. As always, he's the Persian, I'm the Cowboy. And today we're going to be going into an update on what the hell is going down with the Middle East.
Wow. No, that's a big situation, Cowboy. But first off, Happy New Year to everybody. It's been a long time since we've recorded. We took a little holiday hiatus from, I want to say early December to January, so we're back. We'll have more and more content as we go. You know, people's lives get in the way, busyness, all that. But it's happy to be back with you, Cowboy. Always happy to be back with you.
Always a pleasure, my man.
Yeah.
Even if it's no one's listening, we're still just having a good time chatting with ourselves.
I have to say Instagram doesn't like free speech because, they've completely shadow banned us. We were getting so many views, but then we're being slashed all the way through. You know, we get a few thousand views, and then all of a sudden we disappear. So Instagram, do yourself a favor and, start liking American free speech. I understand you're a liberal company, you have ties to the Democrats, but please do yourself a favor. If you want to be more popular again, start expressing free speech values.
Well, something that I saw and I thought was crazy is I was trying to show a friend our podcast, right? And so I pulled up his Instagram page and I started doing a search just for the Persian and the Cowboy podcast. Our football one, the Persian and the Cowboy overtime, pops up, but our main page did not show up in the search at all. So we are not even showing up in search functions for it. So
yeah, that's because when you talk politics on Instagram, and if it's not aligned with the Democrat Party or with liberal values, they will flush you out.
I blame you for all your fiery comments that you got going on
I like to keep it real. If people don't like that, then they can fuck off and listen to something else. That's the bottom line.
Sounds good to me, man. So with that, what the hell is going down in the Middle East right now? We got all kinds of updates. Israel, Hamas, and just Iran is getting involved now.
So I'll break it down for you right now. So as we all know, October 7th, we had Hamas attack Israel, with a surprise terrorist attack that was deadly. About 1,300 Israelis were killed in Israel. And then in response, Israel came with the wrath of God and has been bombing the hell out of the Gaza Strip where Palestinians reside in that enclave. And the problem is, I think a lot of people don't understand this, that Hamas, the terrorist group that resides in the Gaza Strip that took over in the mid-2000s, they're living amongst the people, okay? They're amongst the people, and they are setting up their military operations underneath hospitals, underneath schools. Their weapons caches are all underneath people's apartment complexes and things like that on purpose. They're using people as human shields. So Israeli military cannot distinguish what is a civilian target and what is a military target. So they just decide to, fuck everything up and then just take everything out at the same time, which, the horrible consequences, we have dead innocent civilians like women and children. Close to 30,000 people have died in this conflict in the Gaza Strip, and mainly they're innocent civilians. And we've had a lot of children, a lot of women, a lot of elderly folks, and a lot of innocent men who have no affiliation with Hamas have been killed. And this has spurred an outrage, not just in the Arab world, in the Middle East, but across the globe. We've seen demonstrations throughout Europe, the United States, South America, Australia, and throughout other parts of Asia. So it's becoming a clusterfuck of a situation. And what I mean by that is this is now spewing into a regional conflict in the Middle East. The Middle East has always been a problematic place throughout time.
Well, hasn't it? It's always been a regional conflict, and I just want to say too, it's also despicable to hide behind women and children and the innocents just to protect and get past your own agenda, which is just crazy. So, Hamas being so cowardly and hiding behind their women and kids.
Well, any radical ideology. They're cowards, It doesn't matter. Whatever ideology that's a radical form needs to be eradicated, including radical Islamism.
Okay,
but in the end, that region has always had conflicts that have spewed over, and this is starting to spew over into something very problematic. Because of this, now in Yemen, you have a group called the Houthi rebels. They're backed by Iran. They're supported and funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they're given weapons by Iran.
Do you know more of the history of that? Because I'm, ignorant American cowboy here.
I'm going to break it down for you. So basically, what's happening right now is that this group, these rebels in Yemen who are fighting the Yemeni government over there, they are backed by Iran. They're logistically backed by Iran, militarily backed by Iran, and they're funded by Iran and given high-powered weapons by Iran. There is a proxy war going on in the Middle East. And when I say proxy, these are, let's say a country like the United States has a group of allies in the Middle East that they fund through weapons, through monetary funds, whatever, to fight another country and their proxies. So it's like a game of chess going on between multiple countries.
Yeah.
Iran right now is backing this group, the Houthis, and they are based in Yemen. And since this conflict has risen between, Israel and Palestine, specifically in the Gaza Strip, the Houthi rebels are firing long-range missiles, and they're disrupting shipping lanes in the Red Sea, which can cause economic impact. Okay?
A lot of economic impact. That's a lot of money comes out of the Red Sea right there.
They're firing on foreign ships, oil tankers, military vessels, maritime vessels. So they are doing that, and the United States for the past month and a half has warned the Houthi rebels to stop doing this. And last week, the Department of Defense finally said, hey, we need to do something about this. There were airstrikes, a joint coalition between the United States, the UK, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab allies with the United States and the UK. They started pounding targets throughout Yemen in Houthi-controlled areas. They hit military barracks, missile defense systems, proposed areas that they're doing trainings and things like that. They attacked them. They hit them about 70 targets last week. It was a Friday night last week. They started doing that, and they've been doing it continuously because the Houthis are causing a lot of problems for the West in the Red Sea, and that can have major economic impact. And just this past week, there is a separate issue going on in Iran. There is a province in Iran called Baluchistan, which is in the south of Iran near the border of Pakistan, okay? And there's a separatist movement going on over there, and they want to secede from the Islamic Republic of Iran, and there's been like historical background behind that. It's a whole nother conversation. But basically what happened was Iran started targeting some of these rebel fighters, and some of these rebel fighters are hiding in Pakistan. And, when you as a country go into another country's soil and you fire missiles and you kill people in that country, it is a huge international red line.
Can I back up real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the Houthis are in Yemen targeting ships in the Red Sea to disrupt shipping lanes and economic stuff.
We'll back up to that. We'll go back to that.
So is that just Iran fucking with the Saudis because the Saudis can transport
I think
that
Iran
way,
is trying to. I think the Islamic Republic of Iran is trying to fuck with the West at this point.
So is that because they pretty much control like shipments out of the Persian Gulf, right? And so if they're targeting the Red Sea,
they're targeting the Red Sea because the Red Sea is near Israel. It's where there's a lot of international military presence. And they're trying to cause another problem. They want to drag the United States and the West into further conflict, and they are doing this. And they want to cause economic impact by doing that as well.
with the Suez Canal there and everything.
The Suez Canal being the Suez Canal, you have the Sinai Peninsula, and the Suez Canal is right there in Egypt. But all of this is all close together.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there is a greater proxy war being fought in the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran and Saudi Arabia are two of the biggest enemies against each other. Saudi Arabia hates Iran. Iran hates Saudi Arabia. The Saudis back, a lot of Sunni proxy groups, and the Iranians back a lot of the Shia groups that are against Saudi Arabia. And they're fighting each other in multiple countries in the Middle East, meaning, in Iraq, in Syria. They're also fighting each other in North Africa, in those countries, in, Tunisia, Morocco, in Libya. So you have this conflict spreading. But now, with the most recent conflict being added to the pile, the Israel-Hamas conflict in the Gaza Strip, this only amplifies the whole situation in the Middle East because Iran actually also supports Hamas.
Yeah.
They aid them every year annually with military equipment, with weapons, and also with monetary funds. They get all their direction from Iran. So the bigger problem here is the government of Iran has been a thorn on the side of the West for 5 decades now. And they are causing problems in the Middle East. They want to be a player in their own region, but they're not aligned with the West. They're not aligned with the United States. They're not aligned with Europe, and they want to project their own radicalism and their own vision for that region. And it collides with the West, what we're trying to do. It collides with Saudi Arabia and what they're trying to do. So this is spreading into a bigger conflict that's going to have dire consequences for not only the Middle East region, but also for the world. And it could drag into a third world war, which I think it already has.
Well, yeah, this is going to be looked back as the Franz Ferdinand moments for sure.
So because you look at this, because China and Russia and North Korea are aligned with Iran. So if there's a war with the West, then they're going to supply and fund and help Iran out in the circumstance of a greater world power conflict. So to back up real quick with the situation in Yemen, now the United States and Europe have given the ultimatum to the Houthis to stop their attacks on the Red Sea, or they're going to be further punished, which they're continuing another week of airstrikes. And it's starting to show because the Houthis' capabilities are starting to be a little bit more limited. But they're going to have to continue those airstrikes because it seems like the Houthis have a little bit more power than suggested through their military capabilities, which they're getting from Iran. Okay. Separately, the last month, there's been American servicemen and women who are based still in Iraq, a couple thousand, okay? And Iranian proxy groups that are aligned with Iran have been attacking American troops and allied troops in Iraq at different military installations, at bases with mortar attacks, IEDs, and things of that nature.
Well, that goes back to even when Trump was president, though.
It goes way back, but it's been amplified.
Okay.
There's been an uptick.
Okay.
And what's happened is, in return, the United States has been targeting targets in Syria and Iraq that belong to Iran.
Okay.
So it's kind of a tit for tat kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We're seeing this in Syria too. And now the bigger conflict that's going to cause problems for that region is that Hezbollah, who's the group based in Lebanon, who was founded by Iran, that's heavily funded and supported by Iran, has now been firing rockets across the northern border of Israel that borders between Israel and Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley.
So Israel's surrounded on all sides.
Israel's surrounded by all sides with multiple enemies, and it's caused them problems, but they've been able to defeat multiple enemies in multiple wars. But this has a lot of implications because in order for this conflict, this greater conflict to cease in the Middle East, the common denominator is this. The government of Iran, not its people, because their people are like people like you and I. They want freedom, they want jobs, they want money, they want like everything else that everybody else has.
Iran was very westernized before.
Very westernized under the Shah, and it was going to become a top 10 country in the world. They had the oil, they had the natural gas, they had a lot of plans to project this country into a top 10, top 20 power in the world. Yeah. But due to the Islamic Revolution of 78, 79, and with the radical Islamists taking over with Ayatollah Khomeini, that all changed, unfortunately. So the thing is this. The West needs to realize, and when I say the West, I'm saying the United States and Europe, you cannot deal with radical Islamic fascists who want to basically turn the clock and bring an old age back to the world, who want to take freedoms away, who want to take everything away. You have to crush these people. You have to crush them. The only way you do is not through diplomacy or negotiation. You do it with force. Because if you get rid of Iran's government, and I've said this multiple times on this podcast, if you get rid of their government, you can get rid of the octopi, the main body. You can get rid of the other tentacles, which are Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other groups that are aligned to them. Yeah. And this will dissipate over time. And the Middle East will become more of a prosperous, hospitable region. The thing is, the Middle East has, as we've seen, has a lot of potential, and a prosperous Middle East region is actually better for the United States and Europe for their pocketbooks and for the pocketbooks of people in the Middle East.
So what is Iran's? So it sounds like Iran is stirring the pot quite a bit right there.
Oh yeah,
we got Israel surrounded. They have Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They have Hezbollah up north. They have the Houthis all attacking from like attacking the Red Sea and stuff right there. And then Iran is funding all of this. It sounds like more or less.
Yeah, I mean they're getting their orders from Iran and they're supported by Iran 110%. 110%.
So then my question is, what is the end goal for Iran? Obviously, do they want to just spread their particular sect of Islam outwards?
They want to spread their version of radical Islamism, their government throughout the Middle East region. They want to become. They are a superpower in that region with Saudi Arabia. And they want to spread their influence throughout the region and become the main player. They want to topple Saudi Arabia and become the main dog. But that's not possible because Saudi Arabia has a lot of ties to the West. Mm-hmm. Saudi Arabia is a strong country. They have a strong military. And in the end, you also have Israel there. Israel cannot afford for a radicalized region that's supported by Iran. And at the end of the day, the Ayatollahs want Israel gone. They say in their Friday prayers, when they pray in Tehran, they have a place where all these radical leaders go, and they say death to Israel, and they say we want to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. These people don't realize Israel has nuclear weapons. But the bigger picture here is that Iran also has a nuclear program, and they're getting close to having a nuke. And the thing is, the West and Israel cannot afford for a nuclear Iran, because Iran will use that as an intimidation factor, and they will give those nuclear missiles to people like the Houthis, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, and they'll place it strategically at Israel, and they'll have the technology to maybe target the mainland United States. We cannot afford to have that happen, and we have to attack Iran now to push them back from their nuclear target date. And we also, as a long-term goal, and should do it this year, is to overthrow the Iranian regime with a war.
So, to sum up from right there, so it sounds like Israel just wants to exist in the Middle East, and Iran has the outlook of we're trying to recreate the Persian Empire at this point, right?
I don't know about all that, but they want to spread their own version of radical Islam in the region, and they want to become a bigger player in the region. So they want to become a bigger power, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
And they want to disrupt the old ways of doing things. And that's not going to happen.
They're using Hamas, Hezbollah, and
they're using,
the Houthis as their...
They're using proxy groups to enhance their agenda, and they're using this through force of military, through training, through funding, and through giving of weapons and logistics to these groups.
Got it.
And, unfortunately, it's time to clean house in that region. It's time to wipe the place from head to toe because, and to be honest, Cowboy, we, the United States and the West, are the biggest problem for that region, and I'll explain why. So the problem with the United States and Europe is that for the longest time, we have conducted coups d'etats, placed governments in that region that are aligned with us that don't really have the best interests of the people. And we've made mistakes after time through different political regimes, through different presidents, through different prime ministers in Europe. The problem is the United States, when the Shah was in power, they decided to go with a guy in Ayatollah Khomeini who was in exile. He was in exile. He was not even in Iran. He was projected and propelled by Europe, by the French. He was put on TV. They called him the Gandhi of Iran. He said, I'm going to give free electricity and free water to the people. Okay? I want to say one thing. The Middle East needs dictatorial/monarchs to run those countries because those countries have too many tribal differences, too many religious differences. They need a semi-dictatorship because they cannot have a full democracy. There's too many differences, okay? But I rather have a dictator like a Saddam Hussein or a Muammar Gaddafi in power than a radical Islamist group like ISIS or Al-Qaeda or even a radical Islamist regime like Iran in power. So
that kind of... Well, actually, I'll let you keep going on that.
Yeah, let me
mine's going to take us down into a tangent.
I want to just... So to go a little further on this... So we have made mistakes constantly in that region, and now the chickens have come to roost. We are paying for our mistakes. There's been wars after wars. The invasion of Iraq in 2003, a complete misstep. We didn't have to invade Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. We invaded Iraq because we saw Afghanistan was easy. So we said, hey, these guys have a ton of fucking oil. Let's go there, pillage, rape, do everything, and take everything from these people. Okay. We did it. We overthrew Saddam, and what happened? There was an insurgency that took place in 2003, 2004 that was heavy. Who supported that insurgency? Who funded that insurgency for the most part? It was the Islamic Republic of Iran. We basically gave a country in Iraq that was semi-stable under Saddam, that had no links to 9/11, no links to Al-Qaeda, and basically gave that country on a silver platter to Iran and said, here you go, enjoy. So we basically gave that country away to our biggest enemy in that region, Iran. And now Iran is running the show in Iraq. They tell the Iraqi government what to do. They have a lot of influence in the region, politically, economically, and that makes us look weak. Similarly, in Syria, we let Bashar Assad kind of run his show. Bashar Assad is a dictator in Syria, and he's getting influence from Iran and funding and help from Iran. In 2012, when the Arab Spring happened in the Middle East, You had Barack Obama, a very low energy president, very horrible president in terms of foreign policy. He let the mass genocide of the Syrian people happen under his watch, and the formation of ISIS happen under his watch in Iraq and Syria, and he didn't do anything about it. And it made the region even more chaotic and unstable. Okay? And then in the post-Khomeini era in the early 1980s, Hezbollah was formed. The militia Hezbollah that's based in Lebanon, who's 100% supported and funded by Iran, was based in Lebanon. In the early 80s, the U.S. had troops in Lebanon, and there was a terrorist attack on a U.S. military barracks and the embassy that was there for the United States in Lebanon, in Beirut. And Ronald Reagan, who was a tough guy, cowboy president, no disrespect, cowboy, but he was a tough guy, instead of attacking the Iranian government, instead of going after Khomeini and his regime, he pulled forces out of Lebanon and left and just bounced after that attack. 200 some odd American service members were killed, multiple French service members were killed, and American government workers were killed. So basically, we have made mistake time after time after time. And then with the situation in Afghanistan, completely separate from Iran, but we basically overthrew the Taliban for the Taliban to come back in 20 years with a new version of the Taliban and wasted $2-3 trillion worth of taxpayer money just for that particular conflict.
Yeah.
How does that make sense to me? So basically, we fought for 20 years in Afghanistan, overthrew the Taliban. We basically put a puppet regime in power that basically was extremely corrupt. I mean, you're going to deal with corrupt people in that region no matter what. But they're not very strong. We trained their military, and half their military were high on opium. Not all of them, but they're high on opium and weed the whole time. I mean, you had service members from the United States who basically said we trained them, and they were just so stoned they couldn't even fire a machine gun.
Yeah.
And then basically,
saw the jumping jacks.
And then you had insurgencies ramping up, and then basically you had reports of Russian mercenaries going to Afghanistan and giving money to the Taliban to kill American soldiers, and Iranian special forces were on the ground. They're also helping out the Taliban in weapons logistics and fighting the United States on the ground in Afghanistan. So really, it's like we've made constant mistake after mistake after mistake, and I don't think we're going to make any good choices in the near future. But if the United States and Europe want to do something for that region and the rest of the world, they have to get rid of Iran's regime militarily. If you get rid of Iran's government, the Middle East region will be a much more prosperous place. It won't be perfect, but that's the first stepping stone, because the other terrorist groups that have been formed by Iran will also collapse.
Okay. Several questions.
There you go. Several questions.
Several questions, yes. So I think the main statement that you're trying to make is that a military occupation is better than a religious dictatorship at that point, right?
So to back up real quick, when I say attack militarily, obviously there's going to be occupation involved. We have to help the United.
It doesn't matter like which country. I mean, Saddam Hussein used this example right there. He was like a military dictator, I'd say.
Right. I prefer a military dictatorship in power than radical Islamists in power.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. That's just because Saddam's country, Iraq, it was a stable country. It wasn't the Wild West like Iraq is right now. It was much more stable. But the United States and Europe made the worst decision of a lifetime to remove that dictator from power. And they basically put a bunch of people in the Iraqi government who had ties to Iran and gave that country to Iran on a silver platter. But with regard to Iran, I want to say something. If there is a military conflict with Iran, it's not just going to be a ground invasion or assault on Iran. It's going to be a military conflict throughout the Middle East, because we're going to have to target Hezbollah, we're going to target Hamas, we're going to have to continue our targets on the Houthis and other groups.
Yes.
So it's going to be a longer conflict.
So next question. So I assume that's why the United States has a better relationship with Saudi Arabia than they do with Iran, right?
Well, because Saudi Arabia
the Saudi kings are more interested in making money and just
they're
occupying.
making interested. Yeah, the Saudis. Let me tell you something about the Saudis. If they didn't have oil in that region or natural gas, they have a ton of fucking oil.
Yeah.
Okay. The Saudi government fund is like trillions of dollars. Okay. They'll be chopping each other's heads off in the desert right now. But because they found that oil 100 plus years ago, and the West helped them westernize it, and then they started diversifying their portfolio post oil, they are aligned with the West. They are interested in making money. They want to modernize their country. and they are slowly doing those things. They're aligned with the West. They have
Well, as far
they
as
do not-
as far as that, but not so
Yeah.
much like they're still a dictatorship. They're
Of
still
course.
the kings.
I
and they
prefer
still have a lot
Saudi-
of slave class stuff going on over there. as well.
I prefer Saudi Arabia's those monarch type dictators than radical Islamists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. And so that kind of breaks down the players of it. You have Israel in the west, you got Saudi Arabia south, and then Iran over on the eastern side, all trying to play the games around with each other. And the next question is, if the United States were to take out the Iranian government,
Who comes in place? That's your question.
who comes in place? But then also, how you've also said that Russia and China are going to back Iran if something like that were to happen. Is that the domino that tips the major powers facing off with each other?
I
or not?
honestly think because of the mistakes we've made over the past 5 decades, we cannot avoid this conflict. And unfortunately, what will happen is that if the United States has a full-scale war, it's already happening before our own eyes, but I think if Iran fires on a U.S. vessel or hijacks another U.S. cargo ship in the Persian Gulf or the Red Sea or wherever in the Gulf of Oman, then I think that is the smoking gun for an aerial bombardment throughout Iran, in Tehran, Tabriz, Shiraz, Abadan, Mashhad, the main major cities, and hitting military targets throughout the country. Then if it escalates, then there will be a ground war. There will be a ground war, and the ground war with Iran will be devastating because Iran is not Iraq. When the U.S. fought Iraq in 2003, their military was very weak because of sanctions. They did not have the proper military like they had in the late 80s. They had a much stronger military, but they were crippled by U.S. sanctions and with economic problems. Iran has a much stronger military than Iraq. They have the backing of China and Russia. China and Russia are not going to send troops to Iran, but they're going to send a fuck ton of weapons.
Okay,
like
so it'll be
missiles,
like
shit like that.
It'll be like Ukraine, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But I wouldn't be surprised if Russia said, "Hey, the U.S. just invaded Iran. Let's go invade the country of Georgia fully. Let's go invade Moldova." And then China will be like, "Hey,
Getting
fuck
closer
this."
and closer.
Then basically, if the U.S. just invaded Iran, let's go and invade Taiwan finally. We've been wanting to do this forever. Let's
Yeah.
go fucking do it. And I don't even think the United States will defend Taiwan if that happens. Biden said they will, but I highly doubt that the United States will defend Taiwan. They will let Taiwan fall.
I think we would defend Taiwan, but with our Air Force, not necessarily boots on the ground. But
I don't know if boots on the ground is going to be, they're going to have to do with the Air Force, but
Yeah.
it could be a great excuse for us to attack North Korea.
that does make a lot of sense. Yeah. So if we invade Iran, then that just opens up all the doors for every major power to just invade the countries they've wanted to invade.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
And
gonna,
then if we
that-
invade North Korea,
what
then it's
happens?
just China and
And-
U.S. have the same border, and then
And
boom,
what
yeah.
happens? World War.
Yeah, it
And
all
it
just
already
starts
is
from there.
happening that way. But I don't think the Western governments, the Western world wants to get that going.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I think that they don't want to say this officially because they don't want the markets to collapse. The economy is very fragile. Our country just surpassed $34 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I don't understand how this is not like a number one priority.
How much
anymore.
more of this can we afford to do? You know, we're
Because by the
paying-
time we're old men, when we want to go get an ATM to get our cash, it's not going to be spitting bills out anymore.
Oh yeah, Bitcoin
It's
all
done.
the way, baby. Let's.
Yeah. So I think this country has bigger problems. I think, honestly, I don't agree with candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy, who, thank God, he's no longer a candidate. He's pulled out. He's suspended
He's
his
looking pretty
presidential
strong for the
campaign.
VP though.
Yeah, but the thing with Ramaswamy is that he's an isolationist, and in a world where the world has gone mad, you cannot be isolationist. I'll give you an example.
Well, hang on. Before we go on to Ramaswamy, can I ask another question?
Sure.
You mentioned that Iran and Pakistan had something going down.
Yes, thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that back. So let me go back to the Iran-Pakistan situation, which is just fresh. It's just something else happened today. So there is a separatist movement in a province in Iran called Baluchistan, which is kind of mixed. You have a lot of Iranians there.
Far east side or
It's far to the west.
far to the west
Excuse
of
me,
Iran?
far to the east.
East of
far to
Iran,
the east.
okay.
Far to the southeast.
Okay.
It's on the border of Pakistan, so
Okay.
southeast, okay?
I'm just
And-
a humble cowboy, so my geography is
and
not that.
That's okay. You keep me on my toes here. But basically, in that region, it's very ethnic, it's very diverse, and there is a separatist movement for the people of Baluchistan. They want to separate from Iran, right?
Okay.
It's been always kind of in the back end. There was recently some fighting from rebel fighters there, which Iran, they call them terrorists. So Iran was basically doing reconnaissance missions near Pakistan, and these morons decided to fire missiles at targets in Pakistani soil, like 20 miles from the border inside Pakistan. And for any country, unless you tell the country, hey, I want to come to Cowboyistan and I want to fucking kill a bunch of terrorists there. Do I have your permission? And you say, okay, not only you're going to do it for yourself, but you're taking care of the problem for me from growing within my country. So they did it without any permission.
We don't let your types in Cowboyistan.
Exactly. So they basically, they didn't ask them for permission and they went ahead and just did it. And that is a huge red line internationally. There's international law, all that. Pakistan was pissed. 24 hours later, they did the same thing in Iranian soil and took out some of these rebel fighters in Iranian soil. Now, Iran is all bent out of shape. So now you were having some tension between Pakistan and Iran.
Pakistan's no pushover either.
Pakistan has nuclear weapons.
And a lot of people, too.
And they have a very strong military.
Yeah.
Stronger than Iran's military.
Well, and they've been building it up to go to war with India at any day.
Yeah, so they're ready to go. They're hungry.
Yeah.
So I could see this conflict being a border skirmish. I don't see it blowing onto a full wage war, but there is the potential if there's additional skirmishes. That's the case. The big red flag for me is that both countries have called their foreign diplomats back home.
Oh, shit.
So Pakistan called the ambassador to Iran from Tehran back to Islamabad. Iran did the same thing from Islamabad. They took their diplomats and their embassy workers from Pakistan back to Iran.
So there's no direct communication anymore. It's all just...
They probably have back channels, but right now they're
just
having
text
a lot of
messaging the whole time.
And they want to. They're both calling on the worst organization on the planet, the United Nations, to help resolve stuff. The United Nations should be disbanded. They don't do anything for the world anyways. But going back to my thing about isolationism and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes, go right ahead.
So Vivek Ramaswamy is an isolationist. He's America First agenda, which I am America First agenda as well. But in a world of madness, you cannot have the world's greatest power vanish from thin air. We saw this during the pre-World War II-esque with the buildup of Germany. When Adolf Hitler was building Germany's military capabilities in the 30s.
Yeah.
And then Europe and the United States were concerned. And then Neville Chamberlain, the weak liberal leader that he was for the UK, said, hey, Chancellor Hitler has assured me that he's just rebuilding his country. He's not going to cause a war. And in turn, because of the lax of the Europeans, which they're always lax, we had World War II start in 1940. So we cannot afford to be isolationist during this time period. And isolationism in the end does not work, because in the end, we have to go to war. And we have to send our sons and daughters to war because of mistakes that we make, instead of stopping the conflict from arising.
And it's impossible to know how many lives are saved with a preemptive strike.
Well, you look at World War II towards the end. On the Japanese front, I mean, the United States had to drop the 2 nuclear weapons on Japan, because if the U.S. were to invade with the ground invasion, there's 2 reasons behind that. One, they didn't want to sacrifice millions of American lives again, or the further loss of life in Japan either, because they have to go door to door to fight.
Yeah.
So they said, let's drop the 2 nukes. We'll devastate them. We'll kill about a couple 100,000 people in each city. And that will shake them to surrender. And at the same time, we can then send boots in the ground, and they can avoid a situation like Germany, where Germany got cut in half. Basically, the Soviets got a piece, U.S. got a piece.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't want that happening with Japan.
Because the Soviets had just declared war on Japan for the first time right around that time. Yeah, so...
They didn't want that happening again.
So I go back and forth a lot between isolationism and globalism. Isolationism speaks to the libertarian in me. Why the fuck would I care what the rest of the world's doing, as long as they don't care what the fuck we're doing with it? Our stuff, and over here in the United States, we have the land, we have the resources, we have the oil, we have the food, water situation. We are the most secure.
We're in good shape.
We're the most secure country in the entire world. So why would we give a fuck what's going on in other parts of the world? Let them do what they want to do. But then the example of World War II definitely comes up, and that is a huge problem. And now, for Vivek's standpoint, I don't know exactly to what extent he wants isolationism, but I do agree with a lot of the sentiment right now that the United States has overstepped its bounds in messing with the rest of the world and what's going on and what we're letting them do over there. You know, I think Iraq was the perfect example. They didn't have WMDs. They were not at all...
Had nothing to do with 9/11.
Nothing to do with 9/11, yeah. So it's like, why did we just come in and take them out? Was it just for oil? Was that an imperialistic thing? Or was that a world defense kind of thing?
It was to spread... I mean, the greatest thing was during the film W, okay? It was a very underrated film. I don't like Oliver Stone, the director, but he actually did a pretty good job with the movie. There's a scene where Richard Dreyfuss, the actor who plays Dick Cheney, has a map of the Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. And this is post-Afghanistan. And Josh Brolin plays a really good George W. Bush. He got the accent down. He got the mannerisms down. But they have a meeting in the war room with all the people in the cabinet. And they're talking about the Middle East. Where do we go next? They're looking at the map. And basically, he's showing Iraq, he's showing Iran, and he's like, we can create an empire. No one will fuck with us ever again. By taking the oil and setting up bases throughout the Middle East, we can control everything. And this is the thing that the United States has wrong. The thing is, a prosperous Middle East region, by supporting governments that are aligned with us and who are secular, who are semi-democracies, who have no affiliation with radicalism or radical Islam, is prosperous for the region. Whether they're Arab, Iranian, Turkish, Israeli, whatever. It's going to be better for the economy, better for our pocketbooks, better for their pocketbooks, whatever. You know, in the end, it's almost like the United States wants that region to be chaotic because of the arms dealings and the arms sales and, you know, military-industrial complex. But this thinking of the military-industrial complex, we have to remove this from our head because it's going to cost us even something more dear, and that's going to be a third world war in that region and something even greater that we've never seen before that's going to change the course of humanity.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's not good. It's not good. These are very dangerous
and
times.
that's what I think I support mostly, moving back towards isolationism, not necessarily full isolationism where we just don't listen or talk or communicate to the rest of the world at all, but just dial back the incentives to keep the wars perpetually going. We need to get rid of the Federal Reserve, get rid of all these defense contracts that we have going on. We don't necessarily need everything that we have set up in place.
Well, I think it's very key, and you agree with this too, Cowboy, to have a very strong military. I like, you know, military spending. Maybe the United States does spend a lot, but we have to have a strong military force. I think we should even have a bigger military force in terms of personnel because of all the conflicts that are starting and are taking place and are going to happen in the future. And with the situation with climate change too, things are going to become scarce in terms of, you know, natural resources. However, with regard to world conflicts and who we give aid to, there are certain countries we shouldn't give aid to anymore that we still do.
That I think
there
shouldn't be across the board.
There shouldn't be, as an example to you. First of all, with a country like Egypt, thank God Al-Sisi's in power. He's a dictator, but a military dictator. Perfect. I like that. It's better than having the Muslim Brotherhood in power that almost took power during the Barack Obama administration. Because if Egypt went radical Islamic, that whole region, it would be fucked. So thank God Al-Sisi did a coup with the military and they took over. But during that time, as an example, let's say if the Muslim Brotherhood came to power, we should and would have cut off Egypt from billions of dollars worth of aid. That's one aspect there. So I think we need to start looking at which countries we give aid to. And as a primary example with Ukraine, we have given hundreds, we've given tens of billions, even almost $200 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine to fight Russia.
Not to mention the stuff we lost.
Exactly. At a certain point with Ukraine, the war is in a stalemate. Nobody's winning this war. Russia has not been able to advance. Ukraine has not been able to push them fully back to the territory, but Ukrainians have fought bravely. You can't take anything away from Ukraine. They've done a fantastic job. But at the end of the day, the Europeans need to play a bigger role. NATO needs to play a bigger role in this. The United States is in NATO. However, the United States is the biggest funder of protecting Ukraine. Countries like Germany, France, the UK have to step up and do more in terms of economic aid and military aid.
Yeah.
We cannot shoulder the burden for all these conflicts because, I mean, driving over here, I always take the freeway or the long boulevard. You just look at the infrastructure. things are crumbling here. Our bridges, our roads, our dams, our canals, our educational infrastructure.
That's also a California thing, though.
That's an America thing. You
Well,
have a lot of
California especially.
California especially, but that's an America thing. America has spent so much time in building up its military apparatus across the world and helping other countries out. We have to take care of us first. We have to rebuild our country from the ground up, infrastructure-wise.
And that's what I interpret Vivek's statement as,
yeah,
is
he
doing
wants
that.
that.
He wants, I hope he doesn't overcorrect if he ever becomes president or anything like that. But we need to dial back the amount of tinkering we're doing around the world and bring it back and help out the American people. It's not, the American dream isn't what it once was.
The American dream is lost. It's lost. It is. You have now where you live in a world where basically a gallon of milk is almost $8.
Yeah.
Okay, inflation is destroying people's ability to spend money. Okay, inflation is skyrocketing. There's no end in sight. The government is saying a bunch of shit to make themselves look good for the markets, and then now the report is inflation is getting even higher now. It's going back up.
Yep.
The cost of goods has skyrocketed. The average American is not a millionaire or a billionaire. The average American is a middle-class, hard worker, blue-collar person who's trying to put food on the table for their children and for their families.
Yeah, I just got a breakfast burrito and a cup of tea at a breakfast
Can I guess
today.
how much it was?
Yeah, guess how much it cost.
$13.
No, higher.
$20.
I spent $30.
$30?
Yeah, the burrito itself was like $17. And then cup of tea, a few bucks on top of that. It gets 20 tax on the top of that, and then tip. It's like $30 was my cost out the door. Did I tip pretty well? Probably, but still,
but again, that's an extreme.
$17 for a chorizo breakfast burrito.
5-6 years ago, that was $15 total out the door with like a $3 tip.
Yeah.
So, anyways, things have gotten out of hand, and I think basic services are at an all-time low. You go to a restaurant and really a decent restaurant, like a scale of 1 to 5, I would say like a 3.5. You're paying almost a $200 meal if you get 2 cocktails each, an entree and a dessert item. You're out the door $250.
We'll have to save it for the inflation episode, but I think
this is just
going back to the Middle East. It seems like all the stars are coming into alignment in a bad way,
and it's going to have to happen. I say now is the best time to eliminate America's enemies, foreign and domestic. Take them all out at the same time. And if that requires a full-scale war, then so be it. So be it. But it's the fault of our government and Western governments for making mistakes after mistake after mistake throughout history. And it's led to this point, and we're all going to have to pay dearly, either with our lives, with our pocketbook, or with our loved ones.
And I think we should dial back our influence around the world and work on our home defense and defending the country that we love itself, not necessarily eliminating every country out or every country's government out there that we do not necessarily agree with.
Well, no, when I say
just to dial that statement back a little bit, YouTube.
Well,
sorry, guys.
Well, I'm saying that we have to eliminate the Houthis, we have to eliminate Hamas, we have to eliminate Islamic Jihad, we have to eliminate Iran's government. And if we have to do it militarily, which we're not going to do with sticks and stones, we're going to bomb the hell out of them.
Yes.
And we have to do that.
You needed to clarify enemies because
that's what I just clarified.
Foreign and domestic was a little.
And we probably have domestic folks that live in the United States who have ties to these governments / terror groups, and they should be eradicated as well.
Okay. Clarifying that
there
right
you
there.
go.
Yeah. Not upending the United States government any way, shape, or form.
No. I'm talking about radical Islamists. I'm talking about terrorists. I'm talking about terrorist regimes.
There we go. And
to clarify, there you go.
I think with that we'll call this one and then come back for our next one, guys. It's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, thank you, folks, for your time. Appreciate it.
Cheers, y'all.